The major story is about an election coming up. It's a mayoral election, and the mayor, just a week before the election, gets murdered, and it's in a very, very public manner, and by someone who you then find out is essentially a serial killer who's killing pretty much every prominent member of Gotham society. And then Batman comes into it initially because he's not the kind of a major figure in Gotham at this point, and his only real ally is Gordon, and Gordon's kind of bringing him in as a unorthodox element of the investigation. This is by far the most major adversary he's come across, and also the Riddler is addressing everything directly to Batman, so that's really why he's becoming involved in the investigation, the major reason.
One of the things that distinguishes Batman as a comic superhero relative to most of the others is that he lives in a city that's very recognizable, a city very much like New York City or Chicago. Gotham is obviously styled off of largely New York. And so he's grounded in a way that's kind of uniquely relatable. You know, he's not extraterrestrial, he's a human. He lives, he inhabits this space that many of us do inhabit. And so there's a relatability there that I think Matt really builds on in a compelling way.
Yeah, there's an incredible depth to it, an incredible sense of loneliness and isolation. Every single character seemed to, whether it was articulated or not, seemed to be imbued with a sense of backstory and a sense of subtext and a kind of a deep emotional and psychological undercurrent. So all the characters had a great depth to them. I loved the script. I was riveted by it. It's dark, it's weighty. As I said, there's this kind of fundamental loneliness that aches through every single page.
Man has lived in the hearts of people for, you know, how many years now. It is an incredible character because there is it's so much about duality and so much about you know, dark and light and good and bad and evil and you know, it just is a story and a character that represents, I mean, of all of the kind of the superhero characters, and of course, as in each kind of incarnation, I think, of Batman, it's tended now, and actually this is no exception. It's very much more about the psychological investigation of a character that is caught in his own moral maze of an existential kind of search for what it is to be human and for what it is to be capable of good and to be capable of darkness.
This has kind of a very youthful film noir element to it, which I don't think you've seen in the other ones. You know, between Zoe and Robert, you know, and it has a very interesting, you know, group of people, actors, and so you see what happens.
Batman's arc is, he represents justice for us. He's got to learn that, and beyond justice, as Matt wrote, he's got to become something more. His arc was he had to find what that more was, and clearly he has to provide hope to this city, because this city, like our cities around the globe, we're desperate. Our citizens are desperate for, you know, heroes to give us hope.
It's one of those stories that allows you to find personal ways in. And I always find that with genre work, the important thing for me is to find a personal avenue into something. I have to be able to relate to the character. And Batman as a character, I'm certainly not Batman, but he's a very human character, and he's very, the story is a very psychological one. He's basically coping with things that happened to him as a child, and he's driven to try and make sense of his life. And for me, that's what movie making is, right? You go and you try to tell stories, because in doing so, you're kind of making order and sense of the world. And for me, I started doing that as a kid. I started making 8mm movies when I was 8 years old. And it was sort of my tool of socialization. It's how I met people, but also the telling of the stories and trying to find ways to make sense of things through little stories. That's just something I've always loved. And the Batman story, I think, the story has endured for 80 years. I mean, obviously, it's a character that connects to people. And I think part of the reason that he connects is, you know, there's the suit and there's the car, there's the gadgets. He's super cool. But there's something about the fact that he's not really a superhero. Under all of that, he's just a human being. And he's driven to try and make sense of his life. And that human side of him makes him very approachable. He doesn't have superpowers. What he has is a super heroic drive to try to make the world better, but he doesn't even do that totally in an altruistic sense. He's doing it because what happened to him is something he's never gonna get over, and he's trying to find some way to make a difference in this place.
So much in the gray, and human beings are so complicated, and it's so interesting and fun to watch that in-between space and to live in that in-between space.
I'd never been interested in a superhero movie. I'd never been in the kind of, it'd never been in my periphery at all. And for some reason, Batman just always stood out as a kind of very special, separate entity. It's always the way the movies have been made, and where the character sits in the kind of cultural lexicon, it always feels very individual, and it kind of holds a lot of totemic importance.
Somewhere early in the writing, this idea of him not saying, I'm Batman, and that he'd been referred to as this vigilante who takes on the name The Batman to the city, that's what he represents to the city, that he, in this early stage, is not yet known by the city. So he's actually, at this stage in his career, kind of a frightening figure to the city. And so I didn't want him to announce that he was Batman. I wanted them to give him the name of being the Batman, because he goes around in this bat costume. And I wanted him to use that phrase that is so much in so many of the comics, which is for him to say, I'm vengeance, because this is a personal mission. This whole thing starts really because of what happened to him as a child, and what he's doing is he's taking out his vengeance for what happened to him, and he is playing that against the criminal element.
He doesn't necessarily know that he's going to save the day, and I think that's a kind of important differentiation of this Batman. I think he doesn't know if being Batman is going to work or do anything. He's just compelled to do it more than thinking like, oh, I've made a plan, I'm going to be Batman, and this is what's going to happen afterwards. He doesn't know, but he knows that there is no other option. That basically the options are kind of death or being Batman, and like there's a kind of hopeless. I don't know if it's hopelessness, but there's a desperation to it, which is a little bit different.
I think what I tend to look for in a role like this is, or any role, of course, is, you know, how I can manage it, how I can relate to it, and what is it in the role that I can grab onto and start to build a character around. And I think that Matt had done a lot of kind of a due diligence, a deep archaeological dig into Batman so that the world around him was justified for the audience. And so as I was reading it, that was what I was trying to do, trying to justify myself as well in the role of Gordon. And I've just found that the world that he created was so palatable, that it was relevant to our times, that it was grounded in a kind of a social reality and a political reality even that made sense, and that aesthetically it felt richly Gotham-esque. It was, there was something about the character of the city that really resonated for me in the script. Batman has an opportunity to explore themes, places, as this kind of mythic hero, but these places and these rooms and the city that he inhabits is one that's close to us. And so because of that, we have an opportunity to be adventurous and dynamic, but at the same time probative in a way that is unique to the character. And Matt really, I think, designed the architecture of the space that the film takes place within in a really smart, compelling, and sensible way, in a meaningful way, in a way that's resonant and gives additional depth to the characters and to the story that we're telling.
That's incredible. Matt is one of my favorite directors I've ever worked with. His dedication to the story, his desire to stay true to what's going on emotionally, and at the same time, he's very technical. And his attention to detail is unlike anything I've ever seen. And you know, he does a lot of takes. He goes until he gets it, and I really appreciate that, you know. And I think especially when you are working with someone who you completely trust and believe in, which doesn't happen all the time, you know. Even there's been moments where, you know, I don't quite understand what he's doing or what he's going for, but I completely surrender to him because I know that he knows what he's doing, and it always turns out fantastic. And he's, again, so collaborative. But I don't think I've ever worked with someone who pays attention to detail like him. You know, he'll tell you to say a line, then take a breath, then put your hands down, then finish the line. You know, it's so specific, and this movie is so visual, those things really matter. But it's been really amazing to work with a director who is in such control in a wonderful way, and yet at the same time is so collaborative. He really wants the actors to be a part of the process, make sure they're happy with what's going on. He really listens to an idea, no matter how long he's been visualizing something one way. If someone comes up with an idea, he's always open to hear it. And that's really incredible. It's a true collaborative process. And his love for the story and his intention behind it is the thing that has driven us through this entire project.
And what Matt, I think, has done brilliantly with this script is made Gotham a very mythic place, and yet at the same time, this feel that he's created is, it's of a time that you can't quite put your finger on. So it's not, you know, you don't get caught up with modern technology so much, and you know, you recognize what underpins this world as being something that resonates with ours, but you don't get caught up with the modernity of you know, it has its own, it's in its own kind of mythic, has its own mythic language in the design, I think. And that's what I think Matt very much wanted, so that it you know, the metaphor of the place and the time and the feel kind of really connects with, resonates with our world, but it isn't our world. So it has that, it's our world plus. Gotham is the very worst of our human nature plus.
We set out to make movies to emotionally move people, and we're trying to do things, and even in a big entertainment movie that's such as Batman, you're still trying to present, you know, a world that represents our world. That's one of the best things about Gotham. It's a mirror to our world. We're not necessarily trying to show all of the warts and the problems, but we're trying to represent how things are right now.
he's extraordinary. I mean, he's extraordinary. He's so bright. His mind is functioning at such an impressively high level. The amount of information, I mean, I've seen him at the monitor asking for certain scenes that were shot, you know, months ago, and he remembers which take, what angle, and it's impressive and almost worrying. I mean, it's a lot, and I get the sense that Matt, understandably and rightfully, knows that there is a very rich and very adored and very protected and revered history to this character of Batman and to this world of Gotham and these criminals. And I think the responsibility that he has as a filmmaker and a storyteller is one that he is keenly aware of. And I think I haven't talked to him about it, but I imagine, of course, that he has an enormous amount of respect for certain iterations that have come before him. So it's a huge thing in the world that we're talking about of film. It's a huge thing to take on board. Never mind with all the responsibility and the complications that have come as a result of COVID. But he is incredibly passionate. He has lived and breathed these characters for whatever it is now as a filmmaker. I don't even know as a kid or a teenager in regards to his love for the comic books. But as a filmmaker and a storyteller, he's lived and breathed these characters for 3 years now. He created the script, took him quite a bit of time, he'll tell you himself, to write it because he really wanted to crack the narrative and he really wanted to have a unique perspective on this world. And I think it's probably quite a bit younger Batman than we've seen, Bruce Wayne that we've seen. So it is a new period in the life of this character that I don't think has been explored cinematically.
I was trying to think of how to describe his style the other day, and it's sort of like watching a conductor of like a really huge orchestra, and where he can, like you can see, and he'll kind of get hyper focused on tiny little actions. But he seems to be able to keep the entire story in a macro view in his mind the entire time. And so when you're being like, I just don't really understand how he does it. I mean, there's kind of, he'll be looking at the tiniest little thing of like how you put an object down on the table, and you can see that he's trying the way you do that movement is moving the entire movie in his head, which, yeah, I don't understand how you have a brain which can kind of keep that in the entire time. Also, to watch him when he was directing basically 3 units at the same time, I mean, it's just like, you really trust it. You can feel how much he cares about it. He's never rushed. Like, you can feel like, you know, he'll only move on when he feels like he's got what he needs for the movie. And yeah, and it kind of isn't afraid to stray a little bit from the kind of Batman canon a bit. I mean, there's definitely made some pretty bold stylistic choices, but also like story choices as well. I mean, there's kind of things which I'm not sure if even some of the major plot points are even in the comics or anything. They're just wholly original, which is fun. That's exciting. It's exciting to see what the fans how they'll interpret it and how it will also fit into the kind of Batman canon.
We set out to make movies to emotionally move people, and we're trying to do things, and even in a big entertainment movie that's such as Batman, you're still trying to present, you know, a world that represents our world. That's one of the best things about Gotham. It's a mirror to our world. We're not necessarily trying to show all of the warts and the problems, but we're trying to represent how things are right now.
A friend of mine directed a movie, James Gray, who's a friend of mine since film school, I think is a very talented filmmaker. He made a movie called The Lost City of Z. And I remember him telling me that he had cast Rob in the movie. And when he showed me the movie, because we always share the cuts of movies with each other, and he showed me the movie, and I had forgotten that he cast Rob. And Rob came in the movie, he has this enormous beard, and he's unlike any version of Rob you've ever seen in any movie. And he had such charisma, and I was like, my God, who is that guy? And I really just took a mental note. I thought, oh my God, that's Rob Pattinson. How interesting, he's like a chameleon. And then I just started watching a bunch of movies, and every time he was in a movie, he was totally different. And one of the movies that somebody suggested that I might take a look at during this was Good Time, the Safdie brothers movie. And in that movie, I saw something that to me really connected to Batman, which was in the movie, Rob is very, you can feel his desperation and you can feel his drive. And I felt that this Batman has a kind of desperate drive to try and make things right. And it's like an impossible task. He's so driven. It's almost like a drug. He just is pushed to do it. And the other thing, though, was that I saw within that a level of vulnerability. And I wanted this version of the character to be driven, to be scary, but I also wanted to see his vulnerability. I felt there was a chance here by making it this intimate and this psychological with him, not in his origins, but in what it was to be in the city right now, in this fight to try and make a difference in the city, for the story to be the most emotional Batman that had been committed to film. And when I saw all the different aspects that Rob brought to that role, I was like, I really think it's Rob. And so I started writing with him in mind. And I had no idea, because he'd been doing really interesting work since Twilight. He ended up he would seek out filmmakers, right? So he was working with Claire Denis, and he worked with my friend James, and he found the Safdie brothers and David Cronenberg, like just really interesting filmmakers. And one thing I had no idea as I was writing this was, is Rob gonna have any interest in playing Batman? Will he want to come back to do a blockbuster film? And something very strange happened, which was that it turned out that Rob had a love of Batman since he was a kid. And in fact, I think on one of the Twilight commentaries, I believe he does a Batman voice when he's with Kristen Stewart. And I didn't know any of this, but I found this all out later. But it turned out that once he found out that I was doing the movie, was actually pursuing the movie from his side, because he was very interested to know, oh, what's this new iteration of Batman gonna be? And so it just was sort of fated.
The things that make the performance hard were also what make it appealing. I mean, there's the legacy of people who played it and the directors who worked on it. It's kind of, it both kind of increases the pressure on you, but shows that there are lots of different angles to the character. And it's almost like the more people reinterpret it, it feels like the space to reinvent it gets smaller, but I think it actually just gets more specific, and it's kind of that I find that really fun to try and find just a new way of doing something when a lot of your heroes have played it before.
I love to go on a search where you do a lot of takes, because I come with a plan and I work out my shots and I work out all the beats, and I have a very clear vision of the movie in my head. When I'm writing, I'm really making the movie for the first time on paper, and you just keep remaking it and remaking it and remaking it. And when you come to the set on the day, you have all that with you, but you have to put it aside if you're really going to find something that's alive, because you could have someone just do X, Y, and Z exactly as you do it, but then I really become an emotional compass, and I am there to provoke and to lead and to guide and to sort of say, you know what, compass-wise, we're off track. So let's try to go over here, but I want all of the actors to bring themselves to it. And so I like to go on this search. I do a lot of takes.
Matt's amazing because he's really collaborative, He really does want to know what his actors think and feel about the characters. And before I had the part but had read the script, I kind of thought, why not just tell him honestly what I think and what I feel, even though the part's not mine. And what was really important to me is that Selina didn't come off like a victim, because she comes from a really troubled past. And I think there can be a little bit of a trap with female characters that come from troubled pasts or are vengeful in some way, where they feel like a victim, and I don't think that's who she is. I think she's incredibly tough. And the fact that she has survived this far, and the fact that she has the drive that she does. The other thing that I kind of brought to Matt was this idea of stray cats, of strays, and I think that she's a stray herself. I think she looks at Batman as a stray, and I think that's where their connection lies.
I think Matt, for example, has put all of himself into the script in this film. I think he's got a lot of him in there. I've got a lot of me in there, yet it's the Batman, it's the Riddler. It's for the audience to put themselves into and what parts of them, I just think it's really, truly exciting that we're getting to work with this material that means so much to people.
The harder thing about coming in and out of a movie is figuring out where you contribute, you know, and plugging into the existing tone so you're not in another movie. And that can happen very easily because you don't know what they're doing, you know, you don't know what's going on. And so it's kind of like you're feeling your way in a little bit, you know, because whatever you prepared in your room or by yourself, you have to adjust to see what other people are doing.
I was a big fan of the comics as a kid, and of course, you know, when you come to play a part like Alfred, that there are so many different versions of Alfred in the comics, and also different back histories. So I didn't want to get too hung up on, you know, basing it on one particular strain of who Alfred could be, because he's everything from you know, the military Alfred to a rather theatrical Alfred in some of the comics. He's had a theatrical training, and so we had to make sort of some decisions.
They are our partners. They gave us everything. You know, getting back to the excitement about releasing this thing, everybody signed up to go for this ambitious thing, and the actors really pulled their weight.
If this wasn't going to be an origin story for Batman, it was going to be an origin story in a way for any of the Rogues Gallery characters that I brought in, because in the comics, they were inspired really to become who they were because of the appearance of this masked vigilante. And so I thought, well, almost like an old Warner Brothers gangster movie, I thought as he's trying to go through the kind of fabric that is Gotham and turn down the different alleys and meet with various different criminals and gangsters the way that you would in an old classic Warner Brothers gangster movie. You meet Sidney Greenstreet or, you know, any of those characters, that I thought it would be a way to cross paths with the various different Rogues Gallery characters. And I knew that one that was very important to me was Selina Kyle. I thought that she was a very powerful counterpoint to who Batman was. That Batman is very privileged because, you know, as traumatic as what happened to him was, he has the safety net of coming from a storied and rich family. I mean, being a vigilante is really kind of a luxury. You know, doesn't mean that everybody would choose to do it, but you could only choose to do it if you have the resources to do it, and he does. And I wanted to create a Selina Kyle and draw from the comics to bring a Selina Kyle to life who had a similar upbringing to him, meaning that she had experienced trauma in her youth, but she didn't have any of the things that he had, and that she was a survivor, and that she was this kind of a mirror image of him, but didn't have any of the things that he had, and that she would, as a result of that, challenge him and he her. And so I thought, oh, these two characters, they relate to each other by their differences and by the things in which they share.
I've stayed away from playing, honestly, bad guys for a long time, because when I first started out, I played all different kinds of parts, and then I kind of broke away from that, and I like being away from it. And I don't really, unless it's really complex. So at least in the comics, you see the whole thing. This doesn't have that, but the comic helps you understand that, you know, he's got a family, you know, he loses a son, he's got a sister, and all these people betraying each other. So, you know, we would try to make it as subtle as possible. And I thought, you know, so, and we talked about some real life figures that probably inspired it and things. And then you try it and you see how it works.
The Riddler is a person who's done, who's fed up, and who I don't think can go another day letting Gotham City cycle through its corrupt roots again and again. And I think he's probably blamed himself for all of the failings of his life. And I think once he discovered this corruption, he sees that maybe it wasn't all his fault and that he never had a chance.
Oz is aware of his image, you know, of what he looks like, and certain physical attributes or certain potentially physical handicaps he may have, including a fairly noticeable jerk in his gait as a result of something going on with his right leg, shall we say. And obviously his face is, you know, he wears the hardship of the life that he's lived up until this point. You know, incredibly blatantly, you know, it's all there. You look at his face and you see, got some scars, and, you know, it's fun creating a backstory for every single mark and every single issue that he has. It was fun because it's, you know, there's a wealth of kind of information and a wealth of personal history that one can design that you would hope, in thinking about it, even subtextually or unconsciously, finds its way into the character and onto the screen, but certainly lends itself to much more road. I'd love much more road with this character than I have the opportunity to traverse on this film. You know, I feel like there's such as I said, a depth to everything that Matt has created, every character that he's designed, and particularly only really being concerned with my own character, Oz. I feel that there's just so much emotional and psychological complexity there that I would love to have more road than I'm not giving out, but the 3 or 4 scenes I have, I'm just being greedy, you know. I will say it was one of the most exciting and most jubilant, celebratory experiences I've had in making pictures in 20 years. And I'm not overstating how much fun and how exciting and how a day that was, and how grateful I felt to be a part of that day, because we were all on the same page of experimentation. Everyone had a different thing to do. Art had the teeth, Sasha, she was looking after the hair, Mike Marino and Mike Fontaine were looking after the design and application of the pieces, you know, which come in 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 pieces in 5, 6. There's 6 pieces in total, 6 prosthetic pieces. And then I was taking care of giving it, I suppose, animating it, giving it motion and giving it voice. And, you know, but we all had our own, we all came to the same kind of really specific goal, and we were all dealing with our own versions of uncertainty and nervousness and curiosity, and we all came from different directions. And so to be there that day, and even my youngest son came out to visit after school. My sister, his auntie, picked him up, and he came out to the studio just as we had applied the whole thing, and to see his to see his response to it was really special, was really lovely and really pure. We were all in the room already. Those of us who were working on the film were already really excited and really engaged with what we were doing. And then this, at the time, 10-year-old came out and was just so horrified and excited and shocked and kind of nervous with me for a few seconds. And it was really pure and really lovely. It was a very, very special day. I have to say, it was really magic, and we all commented on it. Because, you know, gratefully I was with a bunch of people who aren't shy about, you know, talking a little bit about how they're feeling in any given moment. So we were all talking about how fun and how pure and enjoyable and creatively expansive a day and experience that first day was.
We only get to do these scenes once. You know, I mean, we're in that location that day, and it's a great scene, and we get to do it, and I just feel like there's no other way to approach it except to work it until it can't be worked anymore. I like that. It coincidentally is how Matt Reeves works as well. He is gonna work this movie. You know you're in really good hands with him because every detail is gonna be worked and accounted for and pushed, and that's something that I feel in myself and I really like in a collaborator. And golly, you know, you're lucky as an actor to get to have a scene like that. And you want to go home, feeling like you can't move sometimes, and I did that day, yeah.
We really believed that this year 2 Bruce Wayne / Batman alone, doing his own thing, building his own, building his own arsenal, developing and building that car from scratch by himself, you know, making that feel tactile and believable that he could do something like that. We thought that as an idea was a cool idea. Once it got realized, we really fell in love with our car. Once we saw that car lit by Greg Fraser, on the sets with James Chinlin, when we put it in action with Dan Lemon's visual effects. You know, I just, you know, from that first thing we tweeted out to the, you know, the final sequence, which is a great Batmobile chase.
Mike designed the Penguin, spent weeks in his studio. We did, you know, full mold, and he had a bust of me, and he carved it and went back to it the next day and carved it more, and he created this absolutely complete character. And honestly, when I saw Mike Marino's work and what he had created and how the Penguin was going to look facially, what his visage was going to be, I was so blown away, and I was so moved and excited and provoked, and my imagination just kind of kicked up a notch. And that was the great gift that Mike Marino's talent has given me on this film, was that he assuaged, and struggle is a good thing to a certain point as anyone who works in anything creative. Struggle is, you know, it's the kite flies highest against the wind, so to speak. So it's good to have some resistance. It's good to have tension and struggle as you're embarking on the path to creating whatever you feel you have to or need to create. But at a certain point, then, you know, you do want a little bit of help, or you want the fortune of the gods to step in and drop an idea in your head, or whatever it may be. And when I saw Mike's work, when I saw what he had done, what he had sculpted, I went, okay, cool. I finally got in my own mind what my version, Matt's version, this film's version of Oz Cobblepot was going to be.
The production design is unbelievable. I mean, you go up to any little piece of anything and touch it and look at it. I mean, there were stickers in the nightclub that were like, had been kind of ripped off and left to dangle, you know? And it was, they'd be really interesting. I had no idea where they found them. Always very, very realistic looking. And then of course you go up and you touch some of this stuff and it's like, it's hollow, you know? I have no idea how they did it.
Yeah, well, James and Matt have worked together before, our production designer, James Chinlin. I mean, I don't know when he was on this film, but it was well before I was, and there was a lot to look at as soon as I, you know, joined the ship. Man, I really, really appreciate James's attention to detail, and I don't know how much, I mean, you'll see it in the film and here, but boy, I mean, samples of handwriting up the wazoo. I mean, every ledger in here is just filled with scribble. His art department, that team, the lengths that they're going to. And I'm a firm believer that God is in the details. You know, I really think that that's what you know, makes something good to great. And between Matt and James, man, we've really got that in spades.
You realize quite quickly there's benefits of you put on the suit and you immediately feel incredibly powerful. And you know, 10 times the size, there's something which yeah, there's obvious benefits to it. But then 10 minutes later you realize if I even slightly exert myself, I'm pouring sweat. And also just trying to figure out how to project a performance through a mask, basically. It's kind of, you realize pretty quickly that this is way harder than a normal part, and has its own very, very specific set of complications and kind of, yeah, things you have to work out. But also you kind of, it's interesting, it's kind of, you're very, very reliant on the lighting, very reliant on the director, because you have to learn, really, you have a new face, basically. And anything which you could rely on before in terms of performance is just suddenly out the window, and you have to just relearn an entirely different language, which is scary at first, because you feel like you're pushing so hard against the suit, and like nothing's coming through, and then you suddenly realize you can just do tiny little movements, and the iconography of the cowl just can be so much more impactful than, you know, anything you could really do with your face in a lot of ways.
When you put the whole thing on, it's not you anymore. I mean, you're there, you're inside, and well, inside is to create a separation. But at the start, it does feel inside, and then it doesn't feel inside anymore. There doesn't feel to be any space between you and what you're wearing. It's all one of the, and what this thing, it's all one and the same. But it does somehow, or certainly did for me, inspire a different way of moving, a different way of talking, a different way of gesticulating.
It was the screen test day, and Matt pulled up and he went, "Come here. I have something you need to listen to." And we sat in his car. I was in his passenger seat, and I didn't know what I was going to listen to. He goes, "Listen to this," and he pressed play, and you know it's Batman's theme, and it's the quieter version of it, and it is so powerful. And it was such a perfect timing to receive that piece of music, because we were about to go watch who was gonna be Batman. I think deep down we of course knew that Rob was our guy, but you want to make sure that when he puts the suit on that he can do it. He did it really well. But we had that music in our heads as we were doing that test.
It was great, Rob Alonzo and his whole team are just incredible people. Funny story, I've known Rob Alonzo since I was a kid. He used to teach me Taekwondo when I was 7. So I hadn't seen him in a really long time, and then we came back together here, and I was like, I know you. So we've been training for a very long time. But it was great that, he's really dedicated to it feeling real and feeling messy and feeling accurate. We're not doing things that don't feel possible. I'm not wearing shoes I couldn't walk in. If I couldn't pick somebody up, I won't do it. I think it's really about he's really concerned about it feeling grounded and real and being motivated by emotion, and that's really great.
Zoe inhabited Selina Kyle in such a way that you forgot that Zoe was Zoe. She was Selina. Like, I see her as Selina Kyle. She just inhabits that thing, which is she's tough for real. She's a survivor for real. She knows the ways of the street for real. She has a real command of her physicalness. She has a real command with her moves. She's got, she's got an emotional quality. She has a vulnerability where you really care about her. She's just got dimensions.
She's very intelligent. I think, obviously, she has a very striking look. You can believe her in a kind of feline way. But I think that the main thing that I got from acting with her was just a kind of constantly working, thinking mind.
Jeffrey just has, he's got an intelligence and a command that is, really just, unparalleled. But he also has, as anybody who's met him, he has an incredible sense of humor. So he's cool. Jeffrey Wright as Gordon is just a cool thing. And so when he gets together with Batman and they only trust each other, there's a rapport that's undeniable and a chemistry that you watch, and they just do this thing naturally. And it's like, these guys have been partners for a long time, and they must have worked together. Like, you just love them.
I lost my mind. I couldn't believe it when we were shooting a scene, and Matt said, he's like, "You're not gonna recognize him." And I was like, yeah. And then Colin walked up to set, and I was like, no. I couldn't believe it. And he walked right up to me, and I was looking for Colin in there, and I couldn't see him. I still to this day, actually, because I've only met Colin a few times outside of this film, I feel like I don't know Colin Farrell. I know the Penguin, I know that guy, but I really only know that guy because Colin's a different person. And every once in a while, I would see Colin leaving after work and be like, who's that? It's so crazy what they were able to do. And then also what Colin was able to do, really bring that character to life with his movements, the way he walked, the way he spoke. All of it, I think what he did with Oz was just impeccable.
Gil's the district attorney in Gotham, and he's both a family man and a guy who's corrupt, and I think in large part, the circumstances we see him in a lot of the film, he's not sober, but I think a lot of that has to do with this really, really high anxiety that he has, which to me comes from somebody who is not morally ambivalent. He's a person that is torn up about what he's involved in and doesn't really see any way out. And he knows the inner machinations of what's going on in the city in such a way that he understands, even before other people around him do, this sort of death spiral that he is personally The one thing that he did, and just in terms of my part and my approach to it, which made me immediately interested in, was he wanted him to have a point of view. And that excited me. And I thought, like, if he's getting this character a point of view, then all of these characters have a chance of having a point of view. And even though the film has this very kind of, this grit that I'm talking about, it doesn't just gloss over the bad guys, you know, it's interested in all of the characters.
There's always this argument with people who are into Batman where people are always asking, is the real Bruce Wayne, is his real self Batman or Bruce Wayne? And I was always kind of interested in that. Things about alter ego and identity and stuff. And I was thinking, if he puts on this suit and he believes in it so much, he believes it kind of elevates him as a creature. Like when he puts on a bat suit, he isn't Bruce, he's Batman. And as Batman, you have heightened sensory abilities. And like, it's just, you've convinced yourself of it, and it is transformative to Bruce. And so I was trying to kind of do that. And, you know, when you walk into a crime scene or something, there's an element of being sort of like a savant or a witch doctor or something, and you just have heightened senses, but specifically because you put the suit on. And so I thought that would, I was trying to put that into the movement where it's more, you're like a wraith or something like that, rather than, you know, just a kind of brutal, ruthless fighter. It's just another part of that, so the handmade nature of everything in this Batman. Like, I like that you can see the construction. It's not like it's alien technology or like repurposed super high-tech military technology. Like, he's built it himself in his basement basically, and it's just, and you can kind of see that. I mean, and you can see him tinkering away at it, there's something that Batman's always, I think, been quite an accessible superhero, even though, you know, he's a billionaire or whatever. Like, there's something, the fact that he's just a guy, I think appeals to a lot of people. And when you kind of get closer and closer to that, and you see that even the Batmobile looks like something he's built himself, and that, you know, if you had the perseverance and the cash, you could build yourself as well. I think it's kind of appealing.
Well, the Gordon Batman relationship in our film is year 2. So it's not at the beginning, but it's early on. And again, Gordon as this kind of overwhelmed everyman who's kind of desperate to rise above the difficulties of, that Gotham is presenting him, reaches out to Batman, I think, out of a level of desperation, but also, I think, again, a sense of admiration that, he is he's a capable figure. And he also recognizes that for some reason, not quite clear at the beginning, they're aligned. They're on the same side in terms of their perspective on the city and on what can be done in the face of, the disintegration. Robert is a really, reserved, somewhat quiet guy, and when he becomes Bruce Wayne, and I don't have many scenes with him, but most of my scenes are with him as Batman, and he came through as Bruce Wayne, and it was, who is this guy? As though he had grown like 5 inches, and he just had a presence about him that's not at all the way he carries himself, when the camera's off. It was really beautiful just to see the transformation, the various steps of transformation that he takes in this. One is Bruce Wayne, and then the transformation that Bruce Wayne takes as Batman. There's just beautifully distinct in a way that's going to be really, really compelling and exciting and new. He's just a wonderful actor, wonderful, interesting, subtle but dynamic performance he's given. It's super cool.
2019, and I literally was traveling with stacks of Batman comics. It was like an entire suitcase filled, and I think I must have read just so many, but I didn't realize you could get them on an iPad. I should have thought about that before. You're living in a world where there's so many different things competing for your attention, and so many different movies and even franchises competing for your attention. And when you know that there's a fan base that's so invested in the story and that really, really, really care, there's so many elements where you're just, you're trying to just make the movie work when you're on a day-to-day basis. But just occasionally you just catch a glimpse of yourself in a reflection or something with the profile and the cowl on, or you see like a bit of playback or something, and it's just incredibly surreal sometimes, and you're like, wait, I'm actually doing this.
I'm so excited for people to see this film. I think, being a part of something that is so anticipated and so beloved by so many people, it was such a joy to make the film, but I think the real joy is going to come with sharing it with the fans who love it so much. And Matt Reeves just did an incredible job, and he is the ultimate Batman fan. He really cares so much. So to have a film that's made by Batman fans for Batman fans, it's this is what it's for, this moment right here.
Matt Reeves has been on it for 5 years, we've been on it for 3 years, and all the kind of work put into it, and then finally seeing the final product, it's such a relief, and it's so kind of exciting to put it out. Yeah, I just can't wait for people to see it. It's gonna be fun.
I'm really excited to be a part of it. From the first time I heard that the film was being made, and I knew Matt Reeves' work from Cloverfield to Let the Right One In, or was it Let Me In? Which was the remake? I keep getting the Scandinavian original. Let Me In was extraordinary, and his work on the Planet of the Apes films. I just think he's a brilliant filmmaker. I think he's somebody who, every now and then you get it actually, funnily enough, with Chris Nolan as well, these filmmakers who create these incredibly immersive and detailed worlds and really transport me as an audience member into these worlds. But at the center of them, there are really fundamental questions being asked about the human condition and behaviors and hope and grief and ambition, and a lot of criminality and a lot of shadow in our film, The Batman. But I'm really excited to be a part of it because I'm a fan of film more than anything, more than an actor. I was a fan of film long before I was an actor, and I may give up acting someday, but I don't believe I'll ever give up being a fan of film. And so to be a part of this and to play a character as iconic as Oz / the Penguin, and work with this bunch of actors, I'm just really excited to be a part of it. I really am. And as John said, the idea of audiences going, it's an event film. So the idea of audiences sharing an experience that I hope is good for them, and I hope they're entertained in a cinema together. It's just, I love going to the cinema. I've missed it so much in my life, and the idea that people are going to enjoy a Friday or a Saturday night, it doesn't always work that way, and we can never be certain, but I believe many will enjoy it and many will find it a rewarding experience. That's cool.
Well, I started this film, I signed on in 2017, so it's literally been 5 years. And as a filmmaker, the thing you want to do is you want to just keep working on something and working on something. And so right now we're in this moment where the movie's done, and all I can really do is wait. But we've started showing it to audiences, we've started showing it to people, and it's so exciting to see this movie with an audience and on the big screen. And so it's this great moment where finally you feel like, okay, you feel like you've kind of raised this kid. I have this 5-year-old, but it's Batman, and we're going to put him out to the world, and I'm super excited. I can't wait for everyone to see the movie.
I think to see it in a movie theater will be really exciting, and I think it's sort of a different take on Batman. It's a a part where you see Batman forming, Oz forming, Selima, who they, forming, and who they become. And so it's like about becoming a lot of the film. And I think it has a very beautiful, particular look done by the great Greg Fraser, the DP. And Matt Reeves is hit on grounding the whole thing in reality, in sort of a film noirish world. I saw lots of different great filmmakers' influences on Matt in little shots here and there. But I think it's, it stands alone, and it's a wonderful group of actors. So I'm excited, for people to see it. So, and I'm happy and delighted to be a part of it. I really am.
I mean, I think what was important to me was I knew that as a baseline, you had to give people, Batman is a character that people love, and he's been around for over 80 years, and they're great movies. So I knew there had to be, you couldn't make a Batmobile movie. I mean, you couldn't make a Batman movie without making a movie that had a great Batmobile chase. It had to have all the spectacle. It had to have all the things that you're going to expect, and we do all of that. But I also felt like it was really important that the movie justify a new iteration, that it needed to be distinctive and stand on its own as a new special thing. And I thought we'd never really seen The World's Greatest Detective as the subject of the movie. Like Out of the Long Halloween by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale, this idea of telling a kind of serial killer story and Batman trying to unravel the mystery in a way that had such detail that you'd never seen before, that was kind of almost like a thriller and a horror movie and all of those things together. And I thought that that could be really fresh and different. And so that was really why. What was important to me in the film was because the Riddler was leaving all of this correspondence at all of these murders and sort of taking down these supposedly legitimate pillars of power that were sort of holding Gotham up. As he was tearing them down, the intent was to describe the corruption in this city, the corruption that had gone back for years, and certainly back 20 years to when Bruce's father was killed. And so for me, Gotham needed to be a character in the film. And so I wanted to make sure that we didn't do a Gotham that was either, because the movie was going to be so grounded, so like the Anton Furst stuff that was done in the Burton verse was so cool and really special, but very theatrical. And Nolan had done a particular take, but at a certain point, after sort of Batman Begins sort of defines itself in a very specific way, but in a certain way, he started going off to sort of more global, and then you would say like, oh, I guess Chicago, or maybe parts of Pittsburgh. And I was like, well, what I want to do is I want this to be an American city that you can't identify. I wanted you to feel like it was a place you'd never been to before, but that felt truly Gothic and truly American. So we actually chose a number of locations that would not have been used for Batman before because they weren't big cities. We shot in Liverpool, and we used the architecture there, the Gothic architecture, and then we used CG sort of buildings and stuff. Our amazing production designer, James Chinland, and my amazing, from the Apes movies that I did, Dan Lemon, our amazing VFX supervisor, they worked to take that real photography and then add in the sort of more modern structures and all of the giant sort of, LED screens and all the stuff that you would see in Times Square, so that we could create, I didn't want to shoot sort of Gotham Square in Times Square because you go, I guess it's New York. I wanted us to have our own, and so we tried to make a signature look so that people would feel like they were seeing this place that felt American, but a place they'd never seen before, so they could see it for the very first time in this movie.
Oz is not the Penguin yet. He's not as elite a member of the criminal element as he wishes he was, and he has ambitions to be. He has very lofty ideas about the direction he's heading, but he's not there. We don't meet him when he's there. He's a soldier, He's not an underboss. He's certainly not a boss. That's John's character, Carmine Falcone. But he's doing okay. Somebody who comes from the humble origins he comes from, which we don't get into in the film, he's doing pretty good, but he has designs on the future. And he's a man who's capable of great violence, but he's also capable of great charm as well. And there's something kind of delightfully uncouth about him, but we definitely meet him at an early stage in his career as a criminal.
If you look at a lot of these old guys who were mob bosses, a lot of them had these kind of dark glasses. They had these masks on, and maybe they needed it, because their eyes were very sensitive to the light. I don't know, to be able to see better. But I thought it's interesting. He's kind of a part of the establishment. He is in the subterranean world. just like what goes on underneath any city, you know, with the sewer system, all the plumbing, the trains, you know, and he's been there longer than anyone, and he's been controlling it. And there are people who don't want to be seen, you know, and they are the ones who control the puppet masters, and they're really, you know, they're real predators in many ways, because they can figure out your soft spot, your vulnerability, and then come in and say, I can help you, you know, I will, and then you're indebted, and then they own you. And it's like borrowing money from the wrong person, you know. And I think there's a lot of that in politics. There's a lot of that in big businessmen. And obviously some of these people became big businessmen. They did. They didn't all start out, you know, these people who were in crime, whether they were an Irish group or the Italian group or the Jewish group, but then they became part of the establishment, a lot of them. And so there was a lot of, you know, we're on the other side of the street. You know, Bruce Wayne is from money, and we're not, you know, we're, so I think my office that was designed, which I think was inspired by Robert Moses' office, which was actually built inside of a bridge. And Robert Moses was probably the most, he certainly built New York. He was the most powerful man in New York State, and one of the most powerful men in the entire country. And not that he was corrupt, but he, you know, he wiped out entire neighborhoods. But he had this kind of subterranean office where, you know, where he went, and it was inside of a bridge. And I thought that was brilliant of a set. And I was really, I wanted to have that as something to be able to, I wish I had an office like that, because I like bridges. I'm a bridge a nut. So anyway, so there was a lot of elements and layers to it.
Batman's relationship with Jim Gordon in this one, he's a kind of, I wouldn't even say up-and-coming detective. He's just a detective in the police department who is the only person who, you know, he just doesn't have any allies whatsoever, and he doesn't know who to trust. And he's kind of out of desperation having to just, like, this kind of freak in a bat suit is the only person he's got even the remotest amount of trust for. And they have a little bit of history, but not a lot. Gordon has absolutely no idea who Batman is. And it's kind of this slightly uneasy relationship where just Gordon doesn't really have a choice. And also Batman and Bruce doesn't have an enormous amount of trust in the cops either. I mean, it's a slightly tenuous relationship, but it kind of builds a lot, and they bond a lot, and the relationship develops a lot over this movie.
Well, I was genuinely surprised by how powerful Matt Reeves' script was on first read. Not just because of the new iteration of the characters and the singular point of view he brought, but because it was clearly coming from an emotional and psychological place, along with what you want out of a Batman film, which is an incredible spectacle. The take on the Riddler begins with Matt, and he referenced some real life things like the Zodiac Killer, which for me only resonated so far. I felt like immediately on my character's behalf that his intent and purpose was so much greater than that I actually almost didn't like him being just a serial killer. It felt wrong to me. I mean, he might be. I'm just saying, like, that's how I felt. You know, that wasn't enough. So how to take sort of the bigness of Gotham and Batman, but make the contact with reality that Matt wanted. And I think that contact is where it could maybe potentially get really scary, or the character could be terrifying the more real it is. So when we went to work on the costume with Jacqueline Duran, they already had some wonderful ideas in place, but we did go through quite a bit of stuff trying to find the exact right thing, things that you could actually get in the world. The mask was very powerful. It allowed a person who felt completely powerless in their life to feel powerful. His inspiration coming from the Batman, and we We tried to sort of just uncover every detail, including adding this saran wrap around my wrists and head, and which was a terrible idea after day one, when my head was just throbbing to a degree that I was afraid to go to sleep at night, because I thought my brain might swell. And so we learned to poke enough holes in it and work with that, and hopefully that energy went towards the character. But we had incredible team on this film, top to bottom. Jacqueline, and the costumes included.
Matt activated the Gordon character in a really clever way through him still being a lieutenant, still being a cop on the street, and gave an opportunity to explore that partnership with Batman in a significant way. Because again, I continue to say it, but it's central to who Batman is, at least in his history in the comics, is that he's the world's greatest detective. And I think it's been something that hasn't been delved into previously in films, not nearly to the extent that we do, but it's the main thrust of our film, and it allows the film a plot-driven center that just serves the interest of our storytelling. And so Gordon is very much partnered with Batman, and very much at the core of things in that regard. And it's a partnership like Matt described yesterday. He thinks in some ways like Woodward and Bernstein of All the President's Men. And it puts them it puts them in the place where their talents, their skills, their drive can be central. So I loved it. And I'll tell you the other thing about it, which I think fans will appreciate as well, audiences will appreciate, is that because we're dealing with mystery, because we're trying to trace the breadcrumbs that the Riddler has left behind, every element of the set becomes a part of the messaging that's leading us through this film toward trying to resolve and solve these mysteries. So it really allowed us a certain stillness in some ways that I found really fun to play with, because there were elements that were on the walls. The production design becomes a character, becomes a part of the storytelling in a way, I think, that's really compelling and just kind of unifies all of the elements of our film, the story, the set, and the characters in a way that's quite good.
Well, when I was writing, I was trying to sort of get to know as many young actors as possible, people in the age, because I knew that I wanted this to be a year 2 Batman. And I had followed Rob's work since Twilight, because he started working with all of these really, really interesting filmmakers like Claire Denis and Robert Eggers and James Gray and David Cronenberg, and he always was doing fascinating work. And he was like a chameleon. He would change and transform. Each one has like a different voice, a different look, a different vibe, and incredible work. So while I was doing that, somebody said, well, you should see him in Good Time, which is a movie by the Safdie brothers. And in that movie, he had an incredible and desperate drive. He was so obsessive. And I thought, oh, that's an obsessive Batman drive. And for some reason, I just, seeing that movie unlocked for me that this was the right guy for Batman. And I started, without knowing if he would want to be Batman, because after doing all these really interesting sort of art films, would he want to do another blockbuster? Would he want to be Batman? I wrote it for him, and it turns out he loves Batman as much as I do, and we're really connected. And so thank God he wanted to be Batman, because in my mind, it could only be him. So that was really why. I was a huge fan of Zoe's, and I wanted, when I was, as with Rob, I needed to sort of familiarize myself. I wanted to meet her. So I met her, and we connected right away, and I knew I liked her as an actor, but when I met her as a person, I thought, oh, she's incredibly thoughtful. She was thinking really, really deeply about this character. And what was important to me was that this, while it wasn't an origin tale for Batman, it really is the origins of these other characters, because the Rogues Gallery kind of creates itself in relation to the fact that this masked vigilante called Batman shows up in Gotham. So I thought, oh, we have a chance here with Selina Kyle to show her pre-Catwoman. And so that means that we really have to understand her as a flesh and blood character. And Zoe had great sort of understanding and insight, and I just, seeing her and talking to her, I was like, oh, I think it's her. And then I did a screen test because we had to make sure that she would have chemistry with Rob, and they were friends. And so the moment, it's one of those things where you had the camera on them and we all just stood and we said, oh, this is it. It was one of those things where there was a kind of magic that they had in their chemistry, and it only got better when we were shooting. You know, there was just, there's something very special about what they have together in this film, and about what she's done with this character, which I feel like is a more humanized and very distinctive version, something different from anything you've ever seen.
Selina doesn't really want Batman's help. Batman kind of needs Selina's help. And I think, to be honest, at first, I really think she wishes he would go away. I think she's, I really do. I think she's so focused on trying to find her friend, and you know, they end up really finding this kindred, you know, they have these kindred spirits, but I think at first she's like, who is this guy and why won't he go away?
Yeah, right.
It's true. It's true. I think she's really like
for like 5 minutes.
Yeah, for like 5 minutes. No, it's true. And then I think she's like desperately in love with him.
Yeah.
But I do think at first she really doesn't want his help. And that's actually, I think, what's interesting about the dynamic is that they need something from each other. They don't actually really want to be around each other. And for months together, that first fight at Mayor's Mansion took us quite a while.
I think the training as well, the more familiar you are with the fighting, you can kind of relax into it, and then you can kind of add that playful element. I think we hadn't had enough rehearsal, and you're just really just trying to muscle your way through those fight scenes. I think it would look a lot more like stiff, but also kind of strange if you're really, like, when you're kind of unrehearsed a little bit, you look like you're just really trying to hurt each other.
Yeah.
And we look kind of like...
It's like a dance, which is like the relationship, I think, between the characters. Right?
And they're very much in control of their abilities as well, so it's kind of, it's not, you know, they're kind of, it's not like I'm hitting you with a baseball bat.
No, it's not. But I do think that, you know, it was a really fun thing to kind of have to express their dynamic without words, you know, and there's this moment, it's totally, I think, sums up their relationship when the security guard comes in and you have to, you know, I have to be quiet, and it is this thing where you have your hand around my mouth, and I think my first instinct is get this person away from me, and then after a few seconds she's like, kind of like it here, kind of like this. So it's a really,
also,
really complex dynamic.
I had to do that quite a lot, and you're incredibly strong. Like, it's actually one of the most difficult things.
Holding me
just
down.
holding you still.
He's like, Zoe.